You're sitting in your car in the parking lot after work. The meeting went badly. The promotion went to someone else. Your phone buzzes with another email you don't want to open. Someone tells you to stay positive, and you want to scream. But the real answer is far stranger than either giving up or forcing a smile. Because everything you've been told about optimism is missing the most important part. The advice always sounds the same. Look on the bright side. Everything happens for a reason. Just think positive thoughts, and positive things will happen. It's not that this advice is wrong. It's that it's incomplete in a way that can actually harm you. Real optimism isn't about believing things will turn out well. It's about something your brain does in the first 3 seconds after a setback. And most people have been trained to skip that step entirely. Here's what actually happens in your mind when life goes sideways. Your brain registers the threat before you're even conscious of it. The amygdala fires. Cortisol enters your bloodstream. And in that split second, something remarkable occurs. Your mind either opens or closes, not metaphorically, literally. Researchers call this the orienting response. Your attention narrows or broadens. When something threatens you, a bad review, a rejection, a failure, your perceptual field shrinks. You see fewer options. You think in black and white. Your brain is trying to protect you by simplifying reality into something manageable. But most of modern life's setbacks aren't physical threats. They're psychological ones. And the narrowed attention that might save you from a predator ruins your ability to solve complex social and professional problems. Have you ever noticed how a single piece of bad news makes everything else look worse? That's not a character flaw. That's your nervous system doing exactly what it evolved to do. The problem is that what kept your ancestors alive doesn't help you navigate a difficult conversation with your boss. So if forced positivity doesn't work, what does? This is where the real science of optimism begins, not with affirmations, not with vision boards, but with something much more surprising. The psychologist Barbara Fredrickson at the University of North Carolina developed a theory called Broaden-and-Build. Her research showed that genuine positive emotions do something remarkable. They literally expand what your brain can perceive. When you experience real positive emotion, not forced positivity, not the performance of happiness, but the real thing, your peripheral attention widens. You notice more possibilities. You connect ideas that seemed unrelated. Your problem-solving capacity increases measurably. It's not that feeling good makes problems disappear. It's that feeling good gives your brain access to resources it can't reach when it's in threat mode. But here's the twist most people miss. Fredrickson didn't find that you need to be happy all the time. She discovered a ratio. For optimal psychological functioning, you need roughly 3 positive emotional experiences for every negative one. Not 0 negative, not forced positive. A ratio. This means the negative experiences aren't the enemy. They're part of the equation. The goal isn't to eliminate them, it's to ensure they don't dominate your psychological landscape. Think about what this actually means for your daily life. You don't have to feel good about getting rejected. You don't have to find the silver lining in every failure. You just have to make sure the failures don't get the only microphone. This is a fundamentally different proposition than what most self-help culture tells you. It's not about overriding your real feelings. It's about giving your positive experiences equal airtime. But something gets in the way, something you've probably felt but couldn't name. There's a belief that's infected modern culture. The idea that you should maintain a positive mindset, no matter how difficult or painful your situation is. It's the voice that tells you to look on the bright side when you've just been fired. It's the Instagram post that says good vibes only. It's the friend who tells you everything happens for a reason when what you really need is someone to sit with you in the darkness for a moment. Psychologists have a name for this now: toxic positivity. And the research suggests it's not just annoying, it's actively harmful. When you suppress negative emotions, they don't disappear. They go underground. They emerge as anxiety you can't trace to any source. They emerge as unexplained physical symptoms. The headaches, the tight shoulders, the exhaustion that settles into your bones. They emerge as the kind of burnout that hits you without warning, because you trained yourself not to notice the warning signs. Why does suppression backfire so reliably? Because your brain doesn't process emotions like files you can delete. It processes them like data that needs to be integrated. Every emotion you refuse to feel gets stored, not resolved, just postponed. And postponed emotions accumulate interest. The bill comes due eventually, and it's always larger than the original debt. So if toxic positivity doesn't work, and if suppressing negative emotions makes things worse, what does work? What actually separates people who thrive through difficulty from those who get buried by it? Martin Seligman spent decades trying to answer this question. As the former president of the American Psychological Association and the founder of positive psychology, he had access to decades of data and thousands of research subjects. What he found surprised even him. The difference between people who bounce back and people who stay stuck isn't about how positive they feel. It's about how they explain bad events to themselves. Seligman called this explanatory style, and he identified 3 dimensions that matter more than almost anything else. First, permanence. Do you tell yourself the bad situation will last forever, or do you recognize it as temporary? Second, pervasiveness. Do you let one failure contaminate every area of your life, or do you keep it contained? Third, personalization. Do you automatically blame yourself for everything that goes wrong, or do you recognize that external factors exist? The people who score as pessimistic on these dimensions, the ones who say, "I always mess up, everything is falling apart, it's all my fault," don't just feel worse, they perform worse, they recover slower, they give up sooner. And here's the part that should stop you cold. Seligman tested this in the real world, not just in a laboratory. He worked with insurance salespeople at MetLife, one of the most rejection-heavy professions on the planet. He screened applicants for their explanatory style and then tracked their performance over 2 years. The optimists outsold the pessimists by 21% in the first year. By the second year, the gap had widened to 57%. But the real insight wasn't that optimists sold more. It was why they sold more. The optimists didn't interpret rejection as a statement about their worth or ability. They interpreted it as a moment that didn't work, a specific event with specific causes. So they made the next call. And the next one. Their resilience wasn't an emotion they felt. It was an interpretation pattern they could sustain. This means your optimism isn't something you have or don't have. It's something you do. It's a cognitive habit, not a personality trait. And like any habit, it can be built. Not by forcing smiles, not by reciting affirmations you don't believe, by practicing a different kind of inner dialogue, by catching yourself when you say, "I always," and asking if that's actually true, by noticing when one criticism has erased 20 compliments and deliberately restoring the balance, by recognizing that feeling hopeless doesn't mean the situation is hopeless. But here's where it gets even more interesting and more counterintuitive. There's a deeper wiring issue at play, something in your brain that makes all of this harder than it should be. The psychologist Roy Baumeister published a landmark paper that every human being should read. The title says it all: Bad is stronger than good. His research demonstrated that negative events, negative feedback, and negative emotions have roughly 3 to 5 times the impact of equivalent positive ones. Your brain is literally wired to prioritize threats over rewards. A single critical comment can erase 20 compliments. One mistake haunts you while 10 successes fade into the background. This isn't a design flaw in your brain. For most of human history, Overlooking a threat could kill you. Overlooking a reward just meant missing a meal you could find tomorrow. The negativity bias kept your ancestors alive. Your great-great-grandparents who worried too much survived. The ones who were too relaxed about the rustling in the bushes didn't. You are the descendant of professional worriers. But here's the problem. In the modern world, this bias has become a profound liability. Your brain treats a critical email with the same chemical urgency it once reserved for a predator in the tall grass. It treats being excluded from a group chat the way it once treated being exiled from the tribe, which, for most of human history, meant death. Your nervous system can't tell the difference between a social threat and a physical one. And if you don't understand this wiring, you'll spend your life wondering why you can't seem to hold on to the good things. The answer isn't that you're doing something wrong. The answer is that you're running ancient software on modern hardware. Optimism in the 21st century isn't about being naive. It's about deliberately overriding a system that's working against you. There's another layer here that almost nobody discusses. It's uncomfortable, but necessary to name. The neuroscientist Tali Sharot at University College London has spent years studying something called the optimism bias, the finding that most people systematically underestimate the likelihood of negative events happening to them. About 80% of people believe they're less likely than average to get divorced, get cancer, or lose their job. This sounds like a cognitive error. It sounds like denial dressed up as neuroscience. But Sharot's research revealed something unexpected and important. The optimism bias isn't just a quirk of human thinking, it's a functional mechanism. People with a mild optimism bias tend to be healthier. They tend to be more motivated. They tend to take the kinds of calculated risks that lead to success and fulfillment. The belief that things will work out, even when that belief isn't perfectly rational, actually changes behavior in ways that make positive outcomes more likely. This is the paradox at the heart of optimism. Believing too much in a good outcome is delusional, but failing to believe enough is paralyzing. The sweet spot is somewhere in between, a belief that your effort matters, paired with a clear-eyed recognition that you can't control everything. Sharot's work points to something crucial. The optimism bias only works when it's paired with agency. Agency is the belief that your actions make a difference. Without it, optimism becomes magical thinking, waiting for things to get better while doing nothing. With agency, optimism becomes fuel, the conviction that trying is worth it even when succeeding isn't guaranteed. This is the distinction that transforms positivity from a hollow platitude into a living practice. You're not trying to convince yourself that everything will be fine. You're training yourself to notice that most things haven't been fine before, and you survived them anyway. That's not wishful thinking. That's evidence-based resilience. It's looking at your own life and acknowledging the data. So what does this look like in practice, in the moments that actually test you? It looks like noticing the explanation you're giving yourself. When something goes wrong, do you hear yourself saying, "I always," or "I never"? That's the permanence trap. Catch it. Challenge it gently. Ask yourself if it's actually true that this always happens, or if this is a specific situation with specific causes. That single cognitive shift, from global to specific, from permanent to temporary, changes how your brain responds to stress at a neurological level. The prefrontal cortex activates. The amygdala quiets. You don't need to feel better to do this. You just need to notice. It looks like letting yourself feel the bad thing. Not wallowing, not spiraling, but acknowledging. Research on emotional processing shows that simply naming an emotion reduces its intensity in the brain. The act of labeling, "I'm feeling rejected right now, I'm feeling scared," activates the prefrontal cortex and dampens the amygdala's fear response. You're not suppressing the emotion. You're not amplifying it. You're observing it. And observation is the first step toward choice. Nothing controls you that you can name and watch. It looks like deliberately seeking Fredrickson's 3-to-1 ratio. Not by pretending bad things didn't happen, by making sure good things get equal airtime in your memory. Your brain will naturally replay the criticism on a loop. It won't naturally replay the compliment unless you make it. This isn't self-deception. This is counterbalancing a built-in bias. Write down what went well. Tell someone about a small win. Your brain needs help remembering what it's designed to forget, and perhaps most importantly, it looks like separating your mood from your decisions. One of the hardest truths about adult life is that your feelings and your choices don't have to match. You can feel hopeless and still take the next step. You can feel terrified and still send the email. You can feel utterly defeated and still show up. Optimism isn't the absence of fear or doubt. It's the decision that fear and doubt don't get the final vote. This brings us to the deepest layer of all, the one that most conversations about positivity never reach. The psychologist Paul Wong has written extensively about what he calls tragic optimism. It's the capacity to maintain hope and find meaning despite unavoidable suffering. This isn't the optimism of ignoring pain. It's the optimism that comes after you've fully acknowledged it. Wong's research, drawing partly on Viktor Frankl's work on meaning-making in the most extreme circumstances, suggests that the deepest resilience comes not from avoiding darkness, but from moving through it with your sense of purpose intact. Frankl survived the concentration camps and emerged with a single insight. You cannot always choose your circumstances, but you can always choose your response to them. That choice, the last of the human freedoms as he called it, is where real optimism lives. It's not a feeling. It's not a belief that things will get better. It's the decision to act as if your response matters, even when you're not sure it does. In the modern world, this truth has been buried under a mountain of performative positivity. Social media has turned optimism into a brand. You post the highlight reel. You curate the inspirational quotes. You perform wellness for an audience. And somewhere in that performance, the real psychological work gets lost. Because real optimism doesn't look good on Instagram. It looks like someone who just got rejected and is already revising their approach. It looks like someone who's scared and doing it anyway. It looks like the quiet belief, held in private, that trying matters even when succeeding isn't guaranteed. That's not photogenic. That's not shareable. That's just living. And here's what the research actually shows when you strip away the branding and the buzzwords. People who allow themselves to feel negative emotions, genuinely feel them, not perform them, not wallow in them, recover faster than people who suppress them. People who explain setbacks as specific and temporary, rather than global and permanent, are more resilient. People who deliberately cultivate awareness of positive experiences, not by pretending negative ones don't exist, but by refusing to let them dominate, report higher life satisfaction. None of this requires delusion. None of it requires pretending. It requires practice. And the practice is simpler than you think. It starts the next time something goes wrong. In the moment when your brain wants to tell you that this is how it always is, that you're not good enough, that everything is falling apart. Pause. Notice the story you're telling yourself. Ask if it's true. Ask if it's complete. Ask if there's another way to tell it. That pause, that question, that tiny gap between the event and your explanation of it. That's where optimism actually lives, not in the feeling, in the framing, not in the emotion you're supposed to have, in the story you choose to tell yourself about what happened. You're sitting in your car in the parking lot after work. The meeting went badly. The promotion went to someone else. Your phone buzzes with another email you don't want to open. Someone tells you to stay positive. And now you know you don't have to. You just have to tell yourself a true story about what happened, specific, temporary, survivable, and then decide what comes next.